Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of our discussion of consumer protections. In the previous video, we looked at protections against misleading, deceptive and unconscionable conduct. In this video, we'll look at other protections, namely unfair contract terms, unfair practices and consumer guarantees. Section 23 of the ACL prohibits unfair terms in standard form contracts. It applies to contracts with consumers, so individuals who acquire goods, services or land for a domestic or personal purpose. The critical thing is that it applies to standard form contracts, so the kind of contracts where there's no scope for you as the buyer to negotiate different terms. For example, your mobile phone contract or a plane ticket. You either agree to those set terms or you don't buy the product or service. In those situations, it's important to protect consumers from unfair terms because of that unequal bargaining power. So, Section 24 sets out that a term will be unfair if it would cause a significant imbalance to the party's rights and obligations. It's not reasonably necessary to protect the party gaining the advantage, and it would cause a detriment to the other party if it was applied or relied upon. The ACL also protects consumers against a broad range of unfair practices. I won't go through all of them in this video, as most are fairly straightforward, but your study guide sets out a list of them, and for your own benefit, it's worth having a look through the various provisions. The first time you tell a door-to-door salesperson to leave under Section 75 of the Australian Consumer Law will make it all feel worthwhile. The thing that unites these provisions is their purpose in protecting consumers. It's about making sure that consumers aren't taken advantage of by the various strategies and techniques that sellers sometimes use. A good example is bait advertising, where the seller advertises a really great special, but deliberately and secretly only has a small amount of stock. So you come into the store to buy it, only to find out that they're all out of stock. But happily and conveniently, here's a more expensive version that they can sell you instead. And since you're already here, you may as well buy that one. Sections 44 to 46 prohibit pyramid schemes, which is always a fun one when your Facebook friends try and harass you to join their sales opportunity. My point is, there's a bunch of really great stuff in there, so it's worth checking out. Lastly, let's look at consumer guarantees, which set out minimum standards for goods. In particular, goods have to be of an acceptable quality, reasonably fit for a disclosed purpose, and correspond with that description. If these sound like the implied conditions in the Sale of Goods Act, it's because they are similar. But the important difference is that they only apply to consumers. So, in comparison, the sale of goods is for everyone. The other difference is that the ACL guarantees cannot be excluded, whereas the sale of good ones can. Goods will be of an acceptable quality under Section 54 if they are fit for the purpose for which they're commonly supplied, appear acceptable, are safe and are durable. The nature, price and packaging can also be relevant in determining acceptability. Importantly, as something of a protection for sellers, goods do not breach Section 54 if the consumer does something that would cause them to become unacceptable or if they are damaged through abnormal use. There are also some parallel provisions for the supply of services, guaranteeing that they will be performed with a reasonable degree of skill. That takes us to the end of the second video for this week. We'll return in part 3 to talk about liabilities and consequences arising from the ACL.